I think we can go with the attorney. Most of this is law related anyway. This is the spotlight on Media to Africa TV live from Washington, D.C. And welcome to all our viewers across the globe. Today we have a very exciting panel to really make sense of the various executive orders concerning immigration of President Trump's second term. With deportation rates being carried out across the country right now, most people in the immigrant communities are living in uncertainty and fear of being apprehended, detained, or deported back to their home countries or other countries that are willing to accept them. Today, we will be trying to make sense of the slew of immigration executive orders of President Trump and to help our viewers make sense of the complex and somewhat complicated immigration policy and policies. I have with me an exciting and very experienced panelist on immigration, political activism, and mental health experts. I would be starting by introducing the members of the panel. Lati, first video, please. Thank you, and again, welcome to the spotlight on Media to Africa live from Washington, D.C. We have with us Attorney Joseph Fad of the Fad Law Group. He is an experienced attorney licensed to practice in New York and Maryland with a strong background in law and business. Mr. Fad has a deep understanding of the legal challenges and opportunities faced by his clients. He holds an impressive array of qualifications, including 3 advanced law degrees, reflecting his commitment to continuous learning and professional growth. He earned his LLB in 2005 and LLM in business law in 2006 from the University of Yaoundé II in Cameroon. His pursuit of excellence brought him to the United States, where he received an MBA from Delta International University of New Orleans in 2010. He further enhanced his academic credentials at the George Washington University Law School, obtaining an LLM in Business and Finance Law in 2011, followed by another LLM in Litigation and Dispute Resolutions. Welcome, Attorney. And here in the studio with me is our permanent consultant to the spotlight, Kenneth Day. Welcome, Kenneth.
Thank you, Bredo. Just another day, another Saturday for us to go through pertinent issues facing us.
And let me bring in Anthony Josephat uh, for more on the immigration situation currently within the U.S. Thank you, Anthony, for coming. White House Press Secretary Caroline Levitt said in the administration view, all undocumented immigrants are criminals because they broke our nation's law by coming into this country. A 2023 congressional report found that an average between 1% and 2% of non-immigrant visas or admissions result in an overstay each year, representing approximately about 650,000 to 800,000 overstays annually from fiscal year 2016 through 2022. An estimated 42% of the approximately 11 million unauthorized population living in the United States enter the country legally but overstayed their period of admission. What does the law say? Does it matter whether immigrants cross the border illegally or enter the country legally and overstay their visas?
Well, good afternoon. Thank you for having me. I would say that it depends. I would agree that you are supposed to have valid entry visa before you come to the United States, and just like in any other countries. But as we all know, the reality is that a lot of people don't have the chance to apply for a visa before coming to the United States, and I am talking particularly those people fleeing violence and persecution in their home countries. Um, the time for you to wait in line at the embassy may be the time for the government to arrest you and toss you in jail. And that explains why a lot of people are taking through the jungles, running away from their countries, and try to find a safe haven. But the rule normally would require you to apply for a visa before you come to the United States. But the law itself has exceptions for certain cases where you don't have time to apply for a visa because your life is at stake. Ultimately, it's a humanitarian issue. We need to protect life. And when it comes to that, the court or the government has made a clear exceptions. You can cross the border illegally if you have a reason to flee your country, and I'm not going to say illegally. There's a process at the border called port of entry, and you go there. You tell them, "I don't have a visa, but because my life is at stake in my country, and the government is likely not to protect me, I need you to please grant me temporary protection by way of either asylum or other relief that may be humanitarian based, like VAWA, for instance, or like special immigrant juvenile status, for instance. Those cases and many more similar to those that I just listed provide an exception for you to have a status without having to leave the US if you left your country for humanitarian reason. Otherwise, if you come here, cross the border illegally, and trying to ask for the government to give you a green card maybe because you're married, that is not possible. There is a separate process for that to punish you or not to reward you for crossing the border illegally. So I could talk about this all day. I don't want to bore
Yes,
the viewers, but if
yes,
there are more questions, I'd
Anthony.
be very happy to answer.
Yes, I'm gonna go back to my question. Is it legally okay for the White House press secretary to say everybody who is here undocumented is a criminal? That is what we're trying to
I
find out because there
disagree.
are people who got in here through a legal process. They obtained a visa from their home countries and then got here and overstayed their visa. And then there are
Yeah. So
people who got here, like what you've described, maybe through the southern borders, got in here illegally and they are undocumented. Is it legally right or correct for her to lump everybody together as
Well, I
criminals
disagree with
who
the
have broken the law.
I disagree with the characterization that if you're here illegally, you're a criminal, because that's not true. You have a valid entry visa, and for one reason or the other, you overstayed. You would see that most people that overstay the visa also have pending application with USCIS. And lately, I have engaged in a lot of challenges with the Department of Homeland Security over some of the notice to appear. It's called NTA. It's the charging document. If you hear unlawfully, they would put you in what we call removal proceeding and charge you. And when you are charged, you're not a criminal. They are telling you, here is exactly why we are bringing you to court. You are a national of maybe Cameroon. You came here lawfully with a visa. You overstayed a visa, and you stay longer than you should have. And your defense in immigration court is yes, I am from Cameroon. I came with a lawful visa. Yes, I overstayed, but I had permission after my overstay to continue staying because after my visa or before my visa expired or after it expired, I applied for maybe asylum. The receipt notice of your asylum application tells you that you are allowed to stay in the US once you've gotten the receipt until after the immigration court or the USCIS has decided whether your claim is valid, right? So when you have that permission to stay, how can you be called a criminal? And I would also say for somebody to be considered a criminal, you need to have a conviction. In this country, the Constitution, and like any other country, provides that you are supposed to be innocent until proven guilty. So the charging document that USCIS gives you provide you an avenue to challenge the accusation levied against you by the government, right? So if I have my defense, I hire my attorney, we go to immigration court, we fight my case, and I ultimately win it, then why are you charging me, considering me a criminal, right? I may have broken US immigration laws by overstaying, but there is a defense. And I am not a criminal unless I am convicted,
So
right?
technically, there is no rationale to qualify these individuals who have overstayed their visas as being as broken the laws of this country. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I would say there's a rationale, but not what we think. The rationale is for political compensations. They're using those words that may not make sense to us, attorneys, but it makes sense to them because it energizes their political base. So there is the rationale to them using that because it makes their people happy. But if the rationale legally it's not justified because it means they either don't understand how the law works or either they do understand but they have a bad faith position and want to change people's perspective. The anti-immigration sentiment now is the highest that this nation has ever seen, but people didn't anticipate what was going to be happening. We can see a lot of people that voted for Trump, black for Trump, Hispanic for Trump, actually being deported. Some of them actually wearing the T-shirt they used to vote for Trump. They don't care. They didn't know, or at least they didn't understand. So the rationale makes sense to them, but for the regular folks that we represent, it doesn't make sense. And for the law, it does not make sense either.
Kenneth, I'm going to come over to you as somebody who has lived in this community. What is your assessment of what is going on in some of these communities? The uncertainty, the fear, the panic, the mass arrest of people, maybe to knocking their doors. What is really the pulse within the community that you feel?
Yeah, there's a lot of panic, uncertainty, and most people are staying home. It's affected families, it's affected businesses, and I mean, you name it, the whole 9 yards. But, Brado, please permit me to go into a little bit of the history very, very briefly for us to really understand what's happening here. Because if you think about it critically, this continent we currently find ourselves in, the natives of America, let's just call them, for lack of a better word, red Indians. And if you go back a little bit, it is because the Europeans were looking for a sea route to India, and then they stumbled across this territory. Now, specifically, we celebrate Columbus Day here. And Columbus Day is attributed to Christopher Columbus, who is said to have, I guess, discovered America. But when you look deeply into it, Brado, you would learn that in fact, Spain and Portugal used to be called the Iberian Peninsula or Iberia, and was for a very, very long time ruled by black people before the current race who is there
The most.
came exactly, it was ruled by the Moors. So back then, when Christopher Columbus was in charge of his ships, there were actually 7 ships. His real name was Cristobal Colon, and he used some of the black people who were in Cape Verde and North Africa, the Moors, to help him find the sea route, because these black people had been coming here for a pretty long time. As a matter of fact, the admiral in charge of fleet number 7 was an African black Moor by name Pietro Alonso Nino. It was Pietro Alonso Nino who was the captain of the Nina, and it is that ship that eventually sailed to Americas. In fact, the Spanish government was very annoyed with Christopher Columbus to the extent that he was actually tried and sent to jail. Worthy of note also is that another black African, Little John, was his name. He traveled together with Vasco da Gama. So when you look at things critically as a whole, the only true Americans aboriginally are the natives of this land, who are the red Indians. Any other person, European or otherwise, is an immigrant into the United States of America. Now, you can argue and say that the Europeans sailed over here and basically took over the land. They engaged in their transatlantic slave trade and so on and so forth. After the transatlantic slave trade took place, if you look at what happened in the 1900s, a lot of the Western Europeans, and in some cases a few Eastern Europeans, but most West Europeans were allowed to come into the United States in huge amounts, in ships. And they were registered in New York, in Boston, and so on and so forth, here in the East Coast. And they were allowed very free entry so that the European numbers could rise. So what is happening today with raids in various communities around here, and then the southern border as well, which is being blocked. I wonder what is going on with the northern border, which is Canada. Perhaps nothing is going on there. I don't know. I'm not exactly sure. But we hear more about the southern border than the northern border. So anyway, there's a lot of panic in the community. People are very unsure what is going on. And those who are in transit or transient nature of their stay here, who are trying to regularize their stay, whose papers are with the USCIS, there is indeed a lot of panic. Yeah.
Thank you, Kenneth. Back to you, Anthony. I'm trying to figure out whether a lot of what is happening, is it just a lot of hot air that has been blown or a lot of grandstanding? Because if you look at reports, the deportations under President Biden were or surpassed what President Trump did during his first term. The deportations under President Obama, from reports, also points to the fact that he was dubbed the deporter in chief. Why is it different now? What is really different? Because these immigration challenges have been here. Is it because it is now in our faces on a daily basis, on the screens, across social media platforms, or this is what has been going on in the dark? It's just that Trump has brought it out in the open.
Well, thank you so much for the question. I would say that it's all about advertising, right? So Obama, the chief deportation officer, was not making a lot of noise about what he was doing in the background. And you are absolutely correct. In his first term, he deported more people that, in the first year, he deported more people that Donald Trump did in the whole first 4 years of his time in the office. So right now, I don't think that the government is doing anything different. In fact, the list of the countries where um, people are being deported to. Cameroon on that list has about 1,700 people. That list was actually created in November 2024, so way before Donald Trump took office. But it now looks as if it's Donald Trump doing it. But what I can tell you is that it's the way the government is now doing these things. They weren't going door to door and raiding people offices. They weren't going to homes raiding people houses. They were not going to public places or school or churches or hospital arresting people. They weren't taking live TV with them when they were going to maybe execute a deportation order, right? But what the government is now doing, if you could see some of the raids right here in Silver Spring and then all over the place in the country, Norm, DHS director, now was actually going there with live TV. Fox News is there filming these people as they're doing these things, and then loading people on the train with cameras just to show that yes, we are actually doing these things as we promised during the campaign. So it's more about media attention than reality. I could tell you that the government does not have the resources to deport all of these people at this time. I understand the numbers. ICE has about 5,000 officers right now. And with the Deutsch, the Department of Government Efficiency, they're trying to just fire just about everybody, except, of course, maybe some ICE officers. But if you fire everybody from the government as they're trying to do, well, who do you have left to carry out this mass deportation orders that we're talking about? Right? I think what the government is doing is more media attention than actual facts because right now, until proven otherwise, they've not even reached 20,000 people yet,
And that's why
right? And they want to deport.
I wanted to point that out because it seems to me, from my own assessment, that it appears to be a lot of hot air to cater to their base. That we are doing exactly what we promised we were going to do, but like you pointed out, they do not have the requisite resources to effect the mass immigration of the number of people who are here undocumented. Welcome, Dr. Santos. If you can hear us, thank you for joining. Uh, Lati, can you play us the first video? I think to really go in line with what the attorney said about maybe knocking on doors and pulling people from their job site. There is a video that circulated with some individuals taking upon themselves to do citizens arrest. He lures people through apps ordering for food, and when they get to his house, he picks them up and then detains them inside his house. I don't know whether that is legal or you are better placed to give us some clarity on that. Lati, can you play that first video for us?
With deportation raids being carried out across the country as we speak, many people are now living in fear of being deported.
But the news is not all bad. Fox 5 caught up with a local Newark man who is cashing in on the raids. We go to Jessica Formoso for more.
Many people in the United States are living in fear right now of being deported back to their home countries. Where I am, the streets are unusually quiet as people are staying in to avoid encountering ICE. However, that hasn't stopped local resident Chad Matola from cashing in after ICE announced they are paying $750 for any tip that leads to the deportation of an illegal alien. We caught up with Mr. Matola to learn more. Newark, New Jersey resident Chad Matola is your normal, hardworking American. By day, he drives for Uber, but he may not be doing that job much longer after his side hustle has proved to be substantially more profitable.
You know, so I've been watching the deportation raids on the news like everyone else in this country right now. And as an American, you know, I started asking myself, what can I do to help? And then I was scrolling on Twitter and I came across a post from ICE that said that they are offering $750 for any tip that leads to a successful deportation. And in that moment, a light bulb went off in my head. Yeah, because I figured, look, I order delivery all the time. I order Uber Eats, DoorDash, all that kind of stuff, right? And most of the delivery drivers, I'm pretty sure they're here illegally. I don't know that for sure, but I think I got a pretty good intuition on that kind of thing. I'm pretty sure they're here illegally. So what I've been doing is I order delivery, right? And when the driver shows up, I invite them in, ask them, hey, do you want a glass of water? That kind of thing. And then I perform a citizen's arrest on them and I lock them in my spare room. Yeah, exactly. I just keep doing that and I do that all day until eventually the room gets full. I currently have, I think, like 7 in there right now.
Legal experts have warned against imprisoning delivery people specifically based on their immigration status, as this may amount to false imprisonment, which is a felony. However, Matola remains undeterred.
And I've heard from some naysayers who have caught wind of what I'm doing, saying that falsely imprisoning people is illegal and a felony. And to them, I say, look, you don't understand. And I think a lot of people don't really know.
Yes, Anthony, that comes directly to you. I'm stunned to see that something like that could be happening in this country. Is it that the president has just emboldened some of the controversial elements within these communities? Is it really legal what he's doing?
I must say that I am very stunned to hear that. I've heard a lot of stuff on immigration and some of the taxes that folks are using, but I haven't seen anything to that magnitude. I don't only practice immigration, I actually practice civil rights, and I am very offended to hear the video, I must say. And there are a lot of things that are wrong with what I just saw on Fox News. And let me start by saying um, there's a lot of stuff wrong with what he just said. You heard there's a $750 tips offered for any 750 bounty on any information that may lead the government to arrest unlawful immigrant. And then you suspect that if anybody is doing DoorDash, then the person must be illegal. Then you order food, and the person comes in, you offer him a cup of water, and when they walked in, you arrest him, you lock him up. So clearly, he just told you himself, he's just locking up everybody, including U.S. citizen, right? So he has no reason to believe that somebody's here illegally. And what does it mean, honestly speaking, to be here illegally? What does it mean? So anybody walking for DoorDash, it's here illegally. Is that what I'm understanding? And speaking of DoorDash and all those delivery apps, right? So how would they allow this person to continue to do this when they know that he's pretty much he's baiting people to come and they get arrested and they're locked up? That guy is in a lot of trouble. I don't see how he's not going to be guilty of civil right violations. First of all, assuming that he was a police officer and he even has the right to arrest people and lock the people up, they have the right to determine whether they should be let go on their own recognizance. They have the right to know if they should be released on the bond. They have the right to see a commissioner or a judge within 24 hours of being arrested. It's a constitutional right. When a private citizen takes upon himself to lock other private citizen on the suspicion that they may be here illegally, no probable cause, because for you to be arrested or detained in criminal cases, it's not a suspicion. There needs to be a probable cause that you have committed a crime or that you are about to commit another crime. So it's not just, this guy smells like he may be a criminal. Well, we all do. But
But
have we
this
committed
guy,
any crime? So
Anthony,
there's a lot of stuff wrong with that.
Anthony, this guy is in New Jersey, and I think certainly in a Democratic county. What is the county attorney doing in a situation like this that the guy comes out boldly and saying that it really doesn't matter to him, he's going to do it anyway?
Now, as an attorney, I am going to be very straightforward. I am not sure to how true what he said he's doing it as actually is, because if he's lying, he's entitled to that, and I'm not going to speak to him lying. But if I rely on his own statement, I call that a plain admission. And he can be admitted to false things that are not happening. But if it's actually true, then the county attorney can certainly charge him with a crime. The county has the right to stop him. He doesn't have the right to arrest people without a warrant. He doesn't have the right to detain people without a warrant. And you can only even perform citizen arrest when there's actually a crime going on, something called hot pursuit. You can then do that. You can stop crime, but you cannot just arrest people because you believe they look or sound like a crime, because that's what immigrants are. And I guarantee you, if you go into the room that he said he locked up people in there, I'm sure you're not going to see anybody looking like him in that room. So what we're doing, it's racial profiling. Maybe you're not going to see anybody in that room that sound like him, right? If you look like him but you don't sound like him, you probably here unlawfully. If you look like
Okay.
me and you sound like me, thank God you in it for a long run. And I could say it's wrong. I did Uber as when I was an attorney. I was also driving for Uber, and I still have my Uber account, driver account active. I suspect that if I were to do delivery at his house, he's going to probably lock me up because I look and sound illegal. And that's the big problem for me. So I think the county ought to do something, and also civil rights attorneys ought to bring charges on them. Thank God he's up in New Jersey. If he was up down here in Maryland, I am sure I'd be very, very happy to find out all of those people that he's arrested, and I'd be very happy to represent them.
Thank you. Dr. Santos, thank you for joining us. I think you are CEO of two mental health clinics, Association of Psychological and Psychiatric Services, and diverse businesses and counseling LLC located in Morgantown, Virginia. What is your assessment of the state of some of these communities that are in complete panic? Do you see a rise in mental case issues within some of these our communities?
Thank you, Mr. Tabenyan Prado, and fellow viewers. I'm glad to join today from West Virginia, and it's not a quite nice era in our history because we seem to have regressed to pre-1864, before the period of emancipation and the period whereby our civil rights and liberties were restored. The achievements that mankind has made in terms of health and medical has is like gradually being taken away from us. When we have a president in the United States who says that he's pulling out from World Health Organization and he's pulling out from USAID and he's pulling out from the United Nations and shutting down the Department of Education, that is a call for concern as there is panic everywhere. Right now, we have seen an influx or an increase in our patient load. Most people who are scared, who don't want to go to work because they are afraid of being arrested, they are seeking family leave of absence. Some children cannot turn to school any longer because they are afraid that they can trace their parents and arrest them back at home. Immigrant children, most of them don't go to school over here. Most have signed for online learning. There is panic everywhere, increase in depression, anxiety, traumatic stress, depression, and panic phobia. So now when we talk about this decision of deporting migrants or immigrants, we are now talking about the transit phase of the trauma. As an evaluator and a psychologist, I will evaluate trauma, fear, depression, anxiety in three levels. There's the pre-migration trauma, anxiety, depression, and anxiety. There is the transit phase of it, and there is the post phase of it. What we are looking now is the transit and the post-migration or post-deportation phase of the trauma. We seem to have forgotten what displaced the human being in the first place. Imagine you being thrown back to your aggressor to be swallowed. What, first of all, caused people to have left their country, their comfort zone, to have moved into another man's land is because of a horrific past. Some might just be going back to meet their aggressors. Some may just be going back to meet those fears that they had before they escaped. Some are going back to die. Some may even commit suicide because they are scared to go back. So in this case, we need to evaluate these cases in three levels. What made them, first of all, to have come here? Those are victims of trauma, torture, and violence. Imagine female children or women who had been raped and forced to leave their country. Imagine the LGBTs who have escaped from their countries and are here, and then they are being sent back to the same fears. So I tell you, and I want to advise that at this particular juncture is not a good time in the history of the United States, and in West Virginia, the mental health homes and rehabilitation centers are getting crowded as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Kenneth. I'm going to come back to you here in the studio. What is the economic impact of some of these actions that you're having people, particularly mostly people in the construction sector, that are being rounded up, and then we don't even know where they are being taken to? There are reports that they are taken to some to Georgia. I think I read a report yesterday that some are taken to Guantanamo Bay as a holding place until their situation is being sorted out. What is really the economic impact?
The economic impact is huge within our ethnic communities, because what is effectively happening is that you have, for example, construction sites, like you mentioned ago. Construction has basically stopped at lots of sites. And then you have other areas in which some of the construction was actually complete and people were in the process of buying houses. That in itself, it has also stopped. And then you have, well, call them menial jobs, what have you, but you have the hospitality industry, okay? The hotels, you have restaurants. Nobody is going to work in all of these places anymore. A lot of restaurants are, quite a few of them, ever since this thing started about 2 weeks ago, quite a good number of restaurants out there are facing huge shortages of water. In fact, haven't we seen the increase in the price of eggs? The price of eggs also, it's increased dramatically. So, in fact, this is actually, it's affecting, from an economic standpoint, it is very adversely affecting the immigrant community. And some of all these things are going to, the multiplier effect, if you would go back to all the countries, various countries that we come from, that receive remittances from the work we all do out here. A lot of these remittances will simply be cut off, you know. So it is a big problem. I just hope that the Trump administration, as much as it wants to do the right thing, is gonna approach this in a much more measured way.
Anthony, let me get back to you. I think the mistake that has been done so far after this slew of executive orders, the focus has been only on the mass arrests and deportations. But if you look at those orders, there were about five or six of those executive orders. Um, you have one that deals with protecting the meaning and value of American citizenship. If you summarize that, that one limits birthright citizenship. Now, to acquire U.S. citizenship, automatically children born on or after February 19, 2025 in the U.S. must have at least one parent who is a legal permanent resident, a green card holder, or a U.S. citizen. What is really the impact of this particular executive order?
I'm going to hold on to your questions and say something real quick about what Dr. Santos said earlier, and then I'll come back to answer that question.
That's right.
Going back to what Dr. Santos was talking about, I just want to reassure the population that Dr. Santos is actually correct because their fear it's well placed given the context that we are all in. But as an attorney, I also want to reassure the populations that the list that the government put out of all the countries with the deportees on it, if you read that list carefully, at the bottom it says that if you are here, you have applied for a change in your status, you have an application that is pending with USCIS that has not yet been decided, or you've been granted some kind of protection against deportation, maybe TPS, temporary protected status, or you've applied for asylum, your case is still pending. You've applied for marriage, you have your work permit, your case is still pending. You've applied for a F1 or exchange visa, your case is still pending. You have a document with USCIS that is pending. You should not be worried. If you see ICE, this is not about you. They're not out looking for you. I do recognize that they have this thing called collateral, where they could just arrest anybody while they're arresting somebody else that is should be deported, right? And then you can be caught in that, but it's not something that they're just out seeing. If you black, they arrest you. If you look Hispanic, they arrest you. That's not what they're doing. They do have a preset lead of people they're looking for. They are deporting people from jail. They are deporting people with final order of deportation, and that order has not been appealed. The order has they don't have any other case that is pending. They're going after those people, and in all of my client since I would say 2011, there is only one person in my list that could be a target for ICE. I'm just saying this to encourage people to go about their business. They should not be hiding under the bed. They should not be hiding in their home. This is not about them. If you are an immigrant that have done a crime in here, then you need to go to jail. And after your time, you get deported. Nobody want a crime in his community. In fact, the crime in our community is the reason why we even fled and come here and seek status here. So nobody want a society with criminals. But if you were just an immigrant trying to find a place for you to be safe with your children, you are trying to be away from the political persecution so that you can maybe build the family. And when things get better in your home country, you go back, then worry not. Don't be afraid. This is what ICE is doing is not for you. Relax home. Now back to your questions, and thank
Anthony,
you for
hold on
allowing
to
me
that,
to address that.
hold on to that before you go back to that question, because I
Yes.
was going to follow up with what you just said. There is this advice coming from now. You have social media flooded with all of these things that people should do if ISIS comes to your door and knock your door. It's being advised that ask them to present, is that a warrant or from a judge or anything of that sort. You should not open the door. Either they should slid that under your door and you should look at it and make sure that it's coming from a judge. A lot of these people that if cross the borders, some would not even understand how that official documents look like. How do these people identify that this is legit and this is not. Because if they knock my door now, I've not seen that document before. I don't even know how to go online and search whether the judge on that piece of paper is an actual judge or is just an AI generated document. How do you get people to actually know that this is how this document look like and this is legit or not? And it's easier said than done that when they knock at your door, you should open it and you don't sit, or you just sit quiet. You know very well that people from most of these immigrant communities, with the panic, there is no way you're going to sit quiet and they're asking you questions and telling you if you don't say anything, we're just going to take you and drop you in a plane and you are out of here and you sit quiet. What assurances are there for you really to make people feel comfortable the way you're saying that maybe they are not for you, they might not be coming for you, but they're knocking your door and you don't know what is going to happen. It might be just going down that rabbit hole.
Now, let me say this, and thank you for asking the question. There are two type of warrant. You get an ICE warrant that is signed by an immigration and custom officer. They can sign something themselves and show it to you. Or you also have a warrant that is issued by a magistrate judge or a judge, depending on the case. And they also sign that, and you see a signature there, and you see a name of the judge there. I would be very impressed to see that the government has gone into an extent of fabricating warrant just to arrest people. I think that's pretty clear case of um, fraud, and that's what a lot of African government do, and that's the problem. So I don't expect that ICE would be out issuing fraudulent warrant to people just to arrest them. But I also know that most people against whom this warrant are issued actually know why the warrants are issued. If you have killed somebody in hiding, and when you see the police and they show up with a warrant, you know they're actually after you, right? But if I sit in my office today and then somebody shows up at the door and say they have a warrant for my arrest, I'm sure they either have a bad address or they have a wrong warrant because he did not do any crime. So I want to take a look at that document. If it does say Joseph Farr on the warrant, and I see that Magistrate Judge Lati has signed that warrant, and I know that he's a judge, that's fine. I'm going to let them arrest me, but I will tell them they got the wrong person. And the first thing I want to do at that point is I need an attorney. If you don't know to read the document, if you think they got the wrong person after they show you the warrant, ask to speak with an attorney right away. That's the most you would ever say. What is your name? Let me talk to my attorney. What is your address? Let me talk to my attorney. What is your father's name? My attorney, please. That would save you a lot of time and a lot of trouble. That is what I can tell you. If you don't know how to read it, make sure you get in touch with an attorney. If you get arrested and you think they got the wrong person, please make sure you actually speak to an attorney right away. And of course, make sure you actually have a phone number for an attorney because they can give you the chance to call your lawyer. And if you don't do it, you're the one now fooling with your own rights.
Thank you. Now
Now
to the next question here,
to the questions.
before we get back to
Um,
Dr. Santos.
Yes, the issue on the birthright citizenship. I did address this on the second day after Donald Trump took office. It's political gibberish. It's completely garbage. Allow me to say this. There are a bunch of preliminary injunctions being issued by different court around the nation. Maryland has done that. Boston is actually fighting on it. So all different federal court has issued an injunction against those that executive order, and I heard the government has now filed an appeal. Um, I don't see how that can pass constitution in the U.S. I don't think the way the constitution of this country was ever written was for Donald Trump or anybody to use a pen to override the constitution. That's why we have check and balances. We have to make sure that a government does not become too big or a president does not become too powerful to override the Constitution. And what Donald Trump has now done is to pretty much say, I can just do whatever I want. You know what? If you here and your dad is not a U.S. citizen or permanent resident, I am sorry. You're not a U.S. citizen. Your child is born here. There's a lot of problem with that, and that would never hold water. I promise that executive order is going to be completely challenged. It has been the 14th Amendment in the Constitution that if you are born here, you are a U.S. citizen. But there's no debate about it. And if you are saying, unless you are born to U.S. citizen parents or permanent resident parents, you're not a citizen of the United States, what kind of sense does that make? We have people that have been here for 28 years and they've been in immigration process for those 28 years. What happened to all of the children that were born here? Right. I know the order, executive order is set to go in effect on February 19. Means that if you're born after February 19, you're not a U.S. citizen. Again, I'm laughing at it because that is just for political amusement than anything else. It's for political debates than anything else. I don't see that to be actually intentional belief. It's going to be at the end. I promise you that I was going to do this. I promise you that I was going to do that. But the Democrat did this. The Democrat blocked this. The Democrat blocked that more than anything else. I don't see any future to that executive order.
Definitely, I think about 24 states and cities and jurisdictions have filed in challenges to that particular executive order. I'm going to move to the next executive order that, for me, I looked at it as purely political. The executive order protecting the American people against invasion. DHS is to set new enforcement policies to address illegal entry, unlawful presence, and removal of those unlawfully present in the U.S. DHS is to expand the use of expedited removal. And then the Secretary of State, the Attorney General, and the Department of Homeland Security are to limit humanitarian parole, designation of temporary protected status, and employment authorizations. According to the National Immigration Forum, the U.S. currently provides TPS to about 860,000 foreign nationals from about 16 countries. Venezuela is at the top of that list with about 350,000 people who have been granted the TPS. Cameroon has about 3,265 Cameroonians who have been granted the TPS. Now, published notices in the Federal Register show that the Trump administration would end deportation protection for those Venezuelans. There are two categories. There are those Venezuelans who applied for TPS before 2021, and the ones who applied for TPS in 2023, which is what they are revoking right now. And there are fears that the same situation is going to happen with the TPS from Cameroon. Now, if you look at the reason why the TPS is granted in the first place, for Cameroon, they had given about 5 different reasons why they decided to grant TPS to Cameroon. They look at the scale and impact of conflict and other violence. They consider the Boko Haram situation in northern Cameroon, the crisis in the northwest and southwest regions of Cameroon, the human rights abuse by the government security forces, then the humanitarian situation in Cameroon. If you look at the humanitarian situation in Cameroon, it's very serious, with 1 out of every 6 people in Cameroon needing humanitarian assistance, and protection amounting to about 5 million people. An estimated 77% of the population is in need of humanitarian assistance, women and children. Moreover, an estimated 480,000 foreign nationals have sought refuge in Cameroon from other countries, along with other returnees. My question to Dr. Santos, before we get to the legalities of that particular immigration executive order. Dr. Santos, given that you are originally from Cameroon, has the conditions in Cameroon changed to warrant a review and possible termination or revocation of the TPS that was granted to Cameroonians?
Thank you very much, Mr. Tabinya. As a humanitarian expert, I will say that asylum or temporary protective status is granted based on a country condition. We have had a war for over 7 years in the English-speaking area of Cameroon or regions of Cameroon, and so far there has not been a resolution that warrants anyone who has been persecuted and as a consequence of that granted TPS to return home without a permanent solution having been found. Equally, Boko Haram is in the north. The solution with Boko Haram has not yet been found in all the regions, stretching down to Nigeria and the other areas in the north of Cameroon. So, telling someone to go back in those trouble zones, it means that you are just going to exacerbate the person's mental health. As I said before, that there are some persons who will prefer to commit suicide than to be returned to their uncomfortable zone. As we speak, I think that until a permanent solution is achieved for the crisis in Cameroon, as well as that of Boko Haram, which are the two predominant problems that Cameroon now face, there should be nobody to be returned to Cameroon at this time who meets all the merits of being a victim of torture, a victim of human rights discrimination, which because most people are not only their request for asylum or a stay in the US coming from Cameroon is not only politically motivated. There is also the LGBT population that we know of that is out here and every other area of the globe.
Yeah, I'm gonna come to Kenneth. I know you hold dear the political situation in Cameroon. To our viewers, what is the current political situation in Cameroon? I understand that there is an election here to elect a new president in Cameroon. And like what Dr. Santos is saying, the crisis in the English-speaking regions have not been resolved.
Exactly.
The situation in northern Cameroon has not been resolved. I think last week there was another crisis in Koteng in the south with the sugar plantation. The Anglophone political leaders, that is Sese Kwayoktabe and his leadership team, are still languishing in the dungeons in Cameroon. They have not been an inclusive dialogue. What is the situation for us to make sure that the Trump administration does not end up sending people back to a place that they will have been persecuted, that there's a possibility that they will be persecuted, given that there are people there that are still being persecuted at this present time that we have spoken?
Okay, Brado. Well, at this time, the Trump administration is in the process of saying that they would not renew the temporary protective status, which is best known as TPS. I think it expires sometime in June of this year. Like we've already indicated, why would you want to end that and then have some of these guys, or everyone for that matter, go right back into the lion's den in Cameroon? We would want to appeal to the Trump administration that at a very minimum they extend it. Or if they want to end it altogether, let them also help us in the case of Cameroon, where we have a dinosaur running for office yet again. And we know very well that the author of the humanitarian crisis in Cameroon, in the southern Cameroons, and everything that goes with it, is the incumbent president Paul Biya. Paul Biya has been in Cameroon, been ruling Cameroon or at the helm of the state of Cameroon for 50 years. 50. He was prime minister from 1975 to 1982. Prime minister. And then 82 up to today, he's president of the country. He has manipulated the constitution, done what he was, and in the state today he is in, dementia, you name it, psychological, what have you, this guy has it, he still wants to run for office. So if the Trump administration is going to end the TPS status, they might as well help us get Paul Biya out of there and let all of us go back and fix our country. You know? But Brado, please let me also mention one or two things that a lot of people within our Cameroon community are in some sort of panic, because even those who are U.S. citizens, and in some cases, regardless of what Cameroon says, I mean, Cameroon in principle, it does accept dual citizenship. You have people like Adolphe Moudiki, the DG of SNH, who is in the hospital in France. He has always voted at the French embassy in Yaoundé during French elections. He used to be married to a white French lady who unfortunately passed away. He is now with Chantal Biya's friend Ngamba, who is basically the lady running SNH. But these are guys who are dual citizens. Samuel Eto'o as well. They are all, Samuel Eto'o is in Fekafut. And then they refused Ndedie Yangu from running for the office of the Music Corporation, claiming he's a dual citizenship. Probably because of the problems Ndedie Yangu's kids may have had with Chantal Biya's children.
Kenneth, let's come back to
Yeah.
the
So,
political situation in Cameroon that would not warrant the Trump administration to send back these people, like what Dr. Santo has intimated, back into the lion's den. What impact is that going to get to this community before I get to that, Tony?
well, I think it's clear. If they go back there, most of them will just be courted into jail. It's that simple. The Cameroon government, they've done it before and they are going to do it again without any remorse. The Minister of Injustice, Laurent Esso, is in France. He's sick. He's in the hospital, but he has all his operatives over there who will do as they please. In fact, it has actually some type of jungle justice that reigns over there. So if these guys are deported back home, they're just going to go right into jail back in Cameroon.
Anthony, if you look at the situation, like you earlier mentioned, some of these individuals who file in for TPS also file in for asylum concurrently. Now, if the TPS expires, would they still be in status as far as the asylum is concerned?
The short answer is yes. But I believe you were asking about the legality of the executive order revoking TPS. And I'd say it's perfectly legal. TPS is at the discretion of the Department of Homeland Security, and countries are designated into TPS status for 18 months, meaning that at the end of 18 months, we can reevaluate. And in our own discretion, meaning the government discretion, they could decide to extend it or not extend it. And you cannot really challenge whether the discretion is abusively held by the government. For instance, if Trump decides to end TPS for Cameroon today or in June, I personally suspect that any challenge to that order would be failing because there's really no legal traction for that kind of challenge. I think it's a humanitarian decision that is probably going to be resting on a lot of lobbying efforts, and the lobbying efforts will be built on change, or at least I'll probably say not on change, but change country condition, change in the sense that Since the last time Cameroon was redesignated for TPS, things have not gotten better. It actually have gone from what it was there to worse. So I would say there are changed country conditions to justify redesignating Cameroon for TPS, particularly, and I'm speaking from a legal point of view. I am not advocating for political opinion at this point, but I'm saying that if you look from the legal requirement for the country to be designated for TPS, this is election year in Cameroon, and we know what usually happen. The country condition provided by the State Department country condition report for Cameroon for 2023 is pretty clear on arbitrary arrest and detention by government and security apparatus in Cameroon. So when we see for traditionally around the election year, the government increase the mass arrest of citizens, the unlawful arrest of political opponents, the unlawful incarceration of just people expressing their political position freely. So we know that in this year leading up to October 2025, there will be a lot of mass arrests. So the country condition right now only support that TPS for Cameroon be extended. Now, but if TPS for Cameroon, at least the majority of my client, even if TPS get interrupted in June, they should be eligible for asylum, and they should be pursuing the claim. I would say that there is a 1 year deadline for filing the asylum, meaning from when you first enter the US, you have 1 year. But the law also provided that there is an exception to the 1 year filing deadline. It's called changes in the country conditions. If I was here for 20 years and I never had the reason to file for asylum, and because now we are in 2025, it's an election year in Cameroon, and I decided that, you know what, let me vote for maybe Mr. Nietzsche or Mr. Kamto, or let me go back to myself being a candidate, and I start an active campaign to support an opposition candidate, and the government is out to get me because I am supporting the opposition, and now it creates the fear for me to return. That may be the requirement, that may be the exception to the 1 year deadline, and I may have a legitimate asylum case. So even if the TPS is revoked, you do have that option if you can lawfully justify filing after 1 year. The problem with that is you have to have a legitimate reason, because when you file your application more than 1 year, the asylum application more than 1 year, you are considered to have filed a frivolous asylum application until proven otherwise. So the burden is on you to prove that there was a good faith basis for you to file that application. And if you are deemed to have filed a frivolous asylum application, you are forever barred from receiving any immigration benefits, and you may even have to go to jail. Let me just make sure that I say that before that the viewer not be confused. You need to have, there's an exception to the filing deadline, but you need to have a good exception. And in the context of Cameroon, and knowing what Cameroon does to its citizen around the election times, and even when there is no election, I suspect that maybe a lot of a lot of Cameroonians that are overseas might be eligible for that.
So to press you on that, first time TPS filers, those who have not filed before, are they still eligible? Because given that the window is going to, the 18 months is going to expire in June, do first time filers, are they still eligible to file as of today?
May I just follow up with something here, Brado? Because we could, just in this conversation, we could be in the middle of, some sort of a golden opportunity here. Because if there's a little over 1,700 Cameroonians who are on the deportation list, right? And then we have TPS, whereby the Trump administration has clearly stated that, hey, we're not going to renew this. Venezuela was there, we didn't renew it. Why would we renew yours? So we're just going to let it expire, right?
No, I
Wouldn't
think,
this be a golden opportunity for maybe the
one
people
second.
who...
I think the case of Venezuela is unique because of the huge number. There are about 16 countries, about 5 African countries that also benefited for the TPS. Go ahead.
So Couldn't this be an opportunity for those Cameroonians who are under TPS right now, a golden opportunity for that matter, maybe to seek to the Trump administration to, first of all, extend this? And if not extend it, maybe draw the attention of Ambassador Tibor Nagy, who is now at the State Department, and he was in Cameroon during the time of Ambassador Francis Cook, to say, hey, you, Paul Biya, step aside. Because there's a mass exodus out of Cameroon because of you. And we clearly know that Paul Biya is ineligible to run for lots of reasons, not only his health, but he's been manipulating a lot of things for a very long time. So this could actually be a golden opportunity for these Cameroonians under TPS and many other Cameroonians in the diaspora in the United States to approach the Trump administration and write a memo and say, please, work with us here, help us to have this guy step aside. I remember Colin Powell did it with, I think it was Daniel Arap Moi in Kenya.
Dr. Santos, I just want you to react to what Kenneth is saying. I was going to actually come to you with that question that what are the measures that the Cameroonian community per se, or in particular, could take to enable them to convince the Trump administration? You have clearly indicated when you address that issue that the conditions, the prevailing conditions on the ground are not in a place where you can have the Trump administration send back some of these people back to Cameroon. What is it that can be done here to mobilize, like Kenneth is saying, mobilize the beneficiaries of this protected status so that the Trump administration should rethink the idea of maybe revoking that status? Please unmute.
You will understand that. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, you will understand that the Trump administration itself, with the type of language that is coming out from the White House, whereby they seem to be the use of the divine rights of
Dr.
kings.
Santos, can you mute the other device because it's having an interference?
Okay, let me this. Hear me with this one. Can you hear me better?
No, it's still the other device is still having an interference. Yes, we're good now.
I've off it.
You're good now. You can go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, so I was saying that as a humanitarian professional, I think anything that has to do with preservation of life and anything that has to do with any human being being put on harm's way is my prime concern and preoccupation to save. Now, we are talking about what is going on in Cameroon and how we can put pressure on the Trump administration to renew the TPS. On the other hand, we are faced with a new leader who is new but not new, because this is the second term, the second time that he's becoming president, sending out very, very horrible signals to the world in terms of humanitarian issues. We are concerned because if you say you would deport American citizens and green card holders to another country, take them to Guantanamo Bay, even you're saying criminals, but I know that for sure some have just minor issues. And then if the secretary at the White House can be saying that all immigrants are like criminals, I mean, that's a call for concern, because people who have come here from very horrible regimes from the world, around the world, like from India and other areas, few dictatorships, are being bundled and sent to their countries, or sent to even third countries, or offering that other countries should take them for payment. Then it means we are confused here, because how can we be complaining of having been in a war for close to 9 years
I
in
want
our
to wrap
region
up
of
now.
the Cameroon and the Boko Haram crisis, which is not over, how will we be spared? Are we sure that Trump is really going to spare us by renewing the TPS? Are we sure? That's the question. Because I think that we should first of all examine the person to whom we are going to lay our plea. But on the other hand, I think the congressional leaders fought for this to become true, and it is not late for them to still keep mounting pressure so that this TPS does not come to an end. Because I know that TPS is a lifesaver for Cameroonians. Asylum also is a lifesaver for most of them, especially those who have gone through all the horrible things that have happened on either side, either from the government or from the Amazonia warlords. Thank you.
Thank, thank you. Anthony, I think we are trying to round up here. Could you please give us your final thoughts on the general impact within the coming months? What is going to happen legally with all these legal challenges? Help our people make sense, given that we are in a period of uncertainty, fear, there is panic. How can you assure a lot of these communities, for those who are very active in some of these communities, when you go around, like today is a Saturday, Friday, people are worried. Uh, you have your law firm here in Maryland, and you practice in New York. Definitely, maybe people can be reaching out to you from this after this program. What is the best advice that you can give to them that makes sense to them, that takes away the legalese and the complex understanding of the law and the immigration policies or policies in this country?
First of all, I want to clarify that I am licensed to practice law in New York
Okay.
and also in Maryland, and I actually physically practice in Silver Spring, Maryland. I don't practice in New York. I practice in Maryland, and I do civil right and a lot of litigation and also immigration. We no longer accepting immigration client. I am more now in the position of advising the community and providing help and answering questions as much as I can. And to that extent, I want to tell people this. If you have a driver license, make sure you always have it with you. You have your work permit, make sure you always have it with you. You have your green card, make sure you have it with you. Just in case maybe an ICE officer wrongfully stop you, they would notice that you are allowed to stay. Anybody with a work permit, it's allowed to stay in the United States and it's pending some sort of status. Therefore, you're not subject to removal. Anybody with a work permit. So please walk around with your identification document. Anything that could show that you have a case that is pending. If you've just applied for asylum and you're not yet eligible for work permit, please use the receipt notice and the paper showing that you've done your fingerprint. Use it and use it on, have it in your wallet so that if ICE officer or anybody stop you, you can show them that, hey, I may not have a work permit, but I have a pending change in status. The government is not out looking for you. If the police come to your house, don't panic. I have done a lot of videos about what you should do if you encounter police. My overall position is please go about your business. Whatever ICE is doing, it's not for you. I challenge any of the panelists to tell me how many people that you personally know that ICE have arrested. I am sure you all say zero. Not a single one of us have actually seen ICE arresting any of our own people, right? There is a general fear out there, but it's not really that the government is out to just arrest just about anybody. We don't, you don't know anybody that knows anybody that has yet been arrested. We don't, because most of us are just good law abiding citizens, and we all have cases pending with USCIS. Therefore, you should go about your life. Go to the mall, go to that movie, go to the shopping trip, go to the hospital, go to school. Don't stay home. The government is not bad. The government is out for criminal, and you are not a criminal. The government is not art for you. Go about your business.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Attorney.
And thank you for having me.
I think to your last statement, yeah, I definitely, one of my friends been picked up and they took her to Georgia. They took pick up here in Maryland and she was sent to Georgia. But like you say, there is really not yet the level of mass deportation that is being portrayed in all the forums around. Dr. Santos, I'll come back to you. Given your background in health and as a psychologist, how do people gain access to some of these services in the community where they can either go in for counseling, where they can take advantage of those services, maybe free services that address some of these core fears that have completely engulfed some of these communities?
Yeah, thank you very much for that. In our communities, we know that all of us are using online resources. We have internet. You have to just Google the 1-800 free counseling online to get services. You can call 911 and say you want to talk to a counselor, and they will dispatch one to you if it's an emergency. If you are having someone who cannot have, who is unable to, to make that call and you are close by, please, you can help that person to call. And then also, we have, in our community, we have a lot of practitioners that we know. In your churches, you may have some of them. Your pastors also can link you up to some of them. I am here at any time. Anybody can call me. My phone number remains uh, 304 uh, 3456. On WhatsApp, you have 442 And you can find me on Facebook and on internet by typing my name, Dr. Nicholas Musanto, and then or you type my clinic, the Association of Psychological Psychiatric Services for Diverse Businesses and Counseling, LLC. I am here to give you or recommend some good resources to you. You can go also to urgent care, and if you need psychological services, you'll be provided with a lot of rich resources for our community, especially those who are in. If anyone who is in detention, you need to talk to your attorney, and you need to also talk to a psychologist. Your attorney will link you to a psychologist who will be able to do you to carry out a psychological evaluation that will help your case. Those whose cases are still pending, you need also psychologists to help them. Mothers of age and those who haven't gone to school, who cannot pass the citizenship examination or citizenship test, are free to contact a psychologist to have medical disability exemption.
Thank,
If you are going through stress, you are going through panic at this time, please take it easy, learn the rule, and learn some coping skills for anxiety, stress, and trauma, the easiest of which is muscle relaxation, deep breathing, splash with cold water, exercise, eat well, and have some rest. These too shall pass. There is no health without mental health. All of us have been going through mental health in one way or the other, be it because of loss of job, because of a child who is sick, or because of bereavement. But all is that there is no health without mental health. This will not be the one that is going to take us to the grave. Thank you.
thank you, Dr. Santos, for that insightful information on the available resources within some of these communities. Please do not hesitate to take advantage of these free services. And if you feel that you are in a situation that you need urgent care, please do not hesitate to call 911. Kenneth,
Yeah.
your last thoughts, given that we find ourselves in this situation in the first place because of the daring situation back in our home countries that really caused a lot of people to either run away for their lives or seek greener pastures. This is an election year in Cameroon. we have one of, I think Honorable Ninche was here, well, is here this weekend. There is the political machinations in Cameroon. Uh, I think that there is an immediate need for the release of Anglophone prisoners and start an inclusive dialogue to resolve the situation in the two English-speaking regions. You are very knowledgeable and adept with the political situation in Cameroon. What is it that you're assuring to send to the Trump administration on the current situation in Cameroon for your last thoughts?
Okay. There's a lot of things happening in our community every day, especially deaths. So there are a lot of people with either United States passports or Cameroon passports, and then they have a green card. There are people who have developed some really cold feet towards traveling. To me, quite frankly, I don't think it's a problem at all. I think people should feel free to travel and live their lives. Just ensure that, you're following the rules. Your passport should not be within 6 months of expiry. Try to renew it before you go. The Embassy of Cameroon has improved dramatically on their services ever since they implemented the visa services. They give people visas once you pay for your visa. So I really don't see a big problem in that regard. Now, as it pertains to this election year, for me, the way I see this, Brado, there are several ways to skin a cat. And we have a golden opportunity in front of us here. The TPS, which is not being potentially extended. Ambassador Tibor Nagy now at the State Department, who was working with Ambassador Francis Cook in 1992 when Paul Biya hijacked the elections and declared himself winner instead of Frundi, when Dipanda Mwele of the Supreme Court indicated that his hands were tied. And then, of course, we know what happened to Professor Maurice Kamto. Our people here should take advantage of this, those especially on TPS and others. Let us approach the Trump administration and tell them to get Paul Biya to step aside. It is that simple. Paul Biya is the author, secessionist in chief, since 1984 of the Southern Cameroon's crisis. Paul Biya, in fact, I wouldn't be surprised if he's given 72 more hours to leave, he would say that the Southern Cameroonians people should go and face the firing squad, like Amadou Ahidjo used to do.
Thank you.
He doesn't like us Anglophones.
Thank you, Kenneth, and thank you to the other panelists. Thank you, attorney of the FAR Law Group. If you want to get in touch with the attorney, the address is 8757 Georgia Avenue, Suite 400 in Silver Spring, Maryland, 20910. The phone number is 301-585-3314. I think, thank you, Dr. Nicolas Santo, who is in Virginia. If you want to also reach him, I think he gave us his phone number. Let me try to share that again. Dr. Santos. The phone number is 442-347-7045. If you want to reach him, if you're having any challenges with your mental health issues, there are other services within our communities. Thank you, Kenneth, for giving you all every weekend to try to provide the needed information to educate and also clarify some of the challenges that we feel within our communities. I would like to end by really not only appealing to the Trump administration that in the case of Cameroon, they should consider that the crisis in Cameroon has not abated. The conditions have not changed from the last time that the status was uh, renewed. So we are appealing that they should consider renewing that status for the 3,265 Cameroonian on that status. And we are also appealing to them to look closely in the uh, pending cloud of uncertainty in Cameroon as far as the political situation is concerned. There is a need for the regime in Cameroon to consider the immediate and unconditional release of the leaders of Southern Cameroon to really create an enabling environment for dialogue so that the humanitarian crisis in Cameroon, the human rights crisis in Cameroon, the abuse from the government and non-state actors should come to an immediate end. That is so that it would stop the influx of people who are running for safety into this country. Thank you and see you next Saturday. Lati?